Hello and welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be part 1 of 3 for my 2023 coaster year in review. In this video, we will cover my bucket list coasters and parks and my second chance coasters and parks. In the next video, we'll talk about the biggest winners and losers of the year and the top 10 overall parks. And stay tuned for part 3 for the top 50 coasters. Starting off with some basic stats, I visited 31 parks this year, 13 being new. I am counting piers as a park, but not individual mountain coasters. I started the year with 191 credits, and I'm ending it with 297, making my total new coasters ridden for 2023 106. Let's start by looking at my bucket lists from the end of last year, how much I've crossed off this year, and how those lists have since changed. First, parks. I shared my top 25, but for time's sake, I'm going to only reflect on the top 10, that being from 10 to 1, Europa Park, Energylandia, Six Flags Great America, Wallaby Holland, Alton Towers, Phantasialand, Silver Dollar City, Six Flags Fiesta Texas, Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Knott's Berry Farm. Now, I didn't make it out to Europe this year, but I did cross off Silver Dollar City and Six Flags Fiesta Texas from that top 10. I was working at Cedar Point this year, but unfortunately did not get to make it out to Six Flags Great America. I'm really hoping to next year. From the remainder of the top 25, I also visited Canada's Wonderland, which was number 11, Six Flags Over Texas, number 19, and SeaWorld San Antonio, number 21. My 2023 revised bucket list parks are as follows, from 20 to 1. Tokyo Disney Resort, Nagashima Spa Land, Liseberg, Glenwood Caverns, Fuji-Q Highland, Disneyland and DCA, Haida Park, Lagoon, Universal Studios Hollywood, Plopsaland Depon, Thorpe Park, Europa Park, Energylandia, Wallaby Holland, California's Great America, Six Flags Great America, Alton Towers, Phantasialand, Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Knott's Berry Farm. Now let's move to top bucket list coasters. My top 10 from 2022 are as follows from 10 to 1, Cannibal, Wildcat's Revenge, Time Traveler, Iron Rattler, Zadra, X2, Twisted Colossus, Egenica, Ride to Happiness, and Fly. I knocked off 3 from this top 10, those being Wildcat's Revenge, Time Traveler, and Iron Rattler. From the remaining top 25, I also checked off number 14, which was Tron Light Cycle Run. My revised 2023 coaster bucket list is as follows, from 20 to 1. Fire in the Hole 2, Hot Wheels, Good Gravy, Wildfire, Hakuge, Untamed, Zadra, Circuit Breaker, Dodonpa, Steel Dragon 2000, Formula Rosa, The Smiler, Ghost Rider, Top Thrill 2, I had Dragster, but obviously I'm not getting that ever. Cannibal, X2, Twisted Colossus, Egenica, Ride to Happiness, and Fly. Let's move on to the parks and then coasters that I wanted to give a second chance to. My criteria for making this list was that I have to have only visited the park or ridden the coaster once, and either wanted to like it more or liked it more than I expected. For parks, I just happened to revisit all 10 that I have on my list. Number 10 was Disney's Hollywood Studios. This was my first visit since 2012, so Toy Story Land, Star Wars Land, and Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway have since opened. My last visit, I'd only had half a day, but this year I had a full day, and I'm so glad I gave this park some more attention. I definitely think I would have enjoyed it even more if I had any interest in Star Wars, no offense to the fans, but despite having no interest, I could still enjoy and appreciate just how amazing the themed area, the rides, Oga's Cantina, etc., all of that was. Rise of the Resistance definitely surpassed all expectations. Not to mention, I got to see Fantasmic for the first time and I was in love. Number 9 was Epcot. I visited at the end of 2021 and did almost all the rides and an abbreviated drink around the world. Since my last visit, Guardians has opened, which was just an amazing ride and pure fun. I also got my first ride on Frozen Ever After and was not expecting turntables and backward sections. Moana Journey of Water, however, was not open in August when I went, which is a nice segue into the downs of Epcot in the summer. Drinking around the world is hot. Don't get me wrong, I still had a blast participating, but myself and my body would have preferred if it were at least 10 degrees cooler. Side note, the Moonshine Sour in the America Pavilion, absolutely perfect, definitely didn't have 4 in a row. Drink responsibly, kids. I'm over 21 and was not driving. Number 8, I'm sensing a pattern, was Disney's Magic Kingdom. My last visit was also in 2012, but I got to go not once but twice this year, once in August and once for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. Since my last visit, Tron and Seven Dwarfs Mine Train had opened. I also finally got on Big Thunder, as it was under refurbishment in 2012 when I went. I found a new appreciation for Space Mountain, and had my first introduction to amazing attractions like Country Bears, the People Mover, Mickey's PhilharMagic, Jungle Cruise, and the Carousel of Progress. I also got to meet a bunch of characters and did not have to go on It's a Small World. And of course, I got multiple rides on Haunted Mansion. I could live in that aesthetic forever. All in all, Magic Kingdom is a wonderful release of the inner child, and I enjoyed it a lot. Number 7 was Knoebels. In 2022, I had half a day, and in 2023, I unfortunately only had half a day as well. I finally got on Flying Turns, Black Diamond, and Cosmos Curves, and got an even better ride on Phoenix than I remember the previous time. However, that's all I got to do. While I'm glad I got to go back, it felt really rushed, and I really want to dedicate an entire day to the park in the future. Number 6 was SeaWorld Orlando. My only visit this year was during Howl Scream, which I thoroughly enjoyed. We got multiple rides on Mako, Icebreaker, which is amazing without comfort colors, and Pipeline, which I found enjoyable, but ultimately a little underwhelming. I also enjoyed their Haunt event. Sure, some houses or midways felt a little cheap, but I was also just coming from Horror Nights. Very different vibes and production qualities. I enjoyed the shows, notably Monster Stomp. This followed the same outline as Monster Stomp at Busch Williamsburg, and it was just as awesome. And Siren Song, where they had dancers on elevated stages surrounding the midway. Yes, it was more adult-themed, but wicked enjoyable. I also liked their little, for lack of better words, foyer entrance area, where guests were corralled before the park opened. They had scare actors, including sliders and stiltwalkers, a store, a bar, wandering bartenders selling syringes and blood bags, and even another siren dance show in the bar. I definitely enjoyed my trip back to SeaWorld Orlando. My number 5 was Carowinds, my first trip having been last year in 2022. I enjoyed the park, but it fell a little short. I don't think my opinion has changed much. I visited once this year for Winterfest. Not to the fault of the park, but it was incredibly busy. Every major ride was at least an hour-long wait. Fury, Copperhead, even the Wild Mouse, which I ended up not getting on because it broke down. Fury solidified my opinion that it's a great coaster, but overhyped. Could have been the cold, but there was more of a rattle than I remember. Copperhead was just as, if not more wonderful than I remember. I understand why not all coasters are open during Winterfest, but it is still a bit of a bummer, since that was my only visit this year. That being said, it was very beautifully decorated, and I really enjoyed the show Tinker's Toy Shop. I would like to go back again during the summer when more is open and give it another real chance. Number 4 was Kings Island. When I went last year, I was blown away. I loved the park. It was my favorite park at the end of 2022. I was eager to get back this year. As I expected, some of the novelty from the first visit had worn off, so I wasn't blown out of the water by a perfect first trip this year, but I still really enjoyed the park and would like to make more trips, especially now that I'm out working at Cedar Point and much closer to it. Number 3 was Busch Gardens Tampa. I think this is the only park on my revisit that I enjoyed less this year. Both of my trips have been in August, but there was just something about this year's. Maybe it's that I went with the group, so I had their opinions swaying mine, but it was incredibly hot. The park is very spread out with not a lot of shade, and for the small, albeit strong lineup of rides, they have such a huge plot of land it felt too spread out. Like, there's just so much space in between the rides. I still enjoyed the park, just less so this year. This was also probably because I had just gotten off of a 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift and didn't sleep on the plane because I drank too much coffee at work, but that's besides the point. My runner-up for parks to revisit was Holiday World. Similar to Knoebels, I had half a day on my first visit and half a day on my one visit this year as well. And I have every intention of my third trip being a full day. This park has so much to offer and I want to give it the attention it deserves. Not to mention, I've heard wonderful things about Splash and Safari, and I really want to experience that too. And my biggest priority park to revisit was Cedar Point. This park is a bit of an oddball on this list because I did end up working ride operations here in 2023. Last year, I said I liked the park, but felt stressed in terms of between quantity of rides, crowd levels, park size. There was too much to do and not enough time if you only have 1 or even 2 days to visit. That being said, this year I got the luxury of being able to visit the park before or after a shift, on my days off, and to just kind of relax and take it slow instead of rushing through the day. For example, on a day off that just so happened to be an employee event after closing, I was able to do laundry and other tasks in the morning, head to the park around 4, and say to myself, feeling gatekeeper today, never ridden Max Air or Power Tower, Magnum sounds cool today, and why not Skyhawk too? Breeze through those rides, especially flats I might not normally do or had never done. Catch a show, grab food at a new dining location, and just have a relaxing night. My opinion on Cedar Point has definitely changed for the better, but I still stand by my point that if you only have 1 or 2 trips a year, there's almost no way to get everything you want done without breaking the bank on Fastlane or a VIP tour. Now to revise that list for this year. The criteria stays the same. I have to have only visited the park once and either liked it more than I expected or wanted to like it more. Counting down from 6th to 1st place. In 6th, we have Canada's Wonderland. I got on all the coasters here except for Fly, their Wild Mouse, due to timing reasons, but I was only able to get 1 ride on each coaster and didn't do any flats aside from the Sky Coaster. I would love to get coaster re-rides, try some of their unique flats, and see the shows again. Their shows were definitely very strong and heavily acrobatic. While it's definitely not my favorite park, I enjoyed myself and would love to spend more time here. 5th place is Indiana Beach. I had half a day here, and it was a cute park, but I wasn't blown away and am in no rush to get back to it. I'd ranked it above Canada's Wonderland because unfortunately I missed out on 3 coasters instead of just 1, those being Cyclone, Hoosier Hurricane, and Steel Hog. And not to mention All-American Triple Loop is set to open next year. I would also like to take more time to do the boardwalk-style flats here, as I, again, really only got to do the Sky Coaster, as well as Frankenstein's Castle, which was incredibly fun, and the Den of Lost Thieves, their dark shooting ride. 4th is Six Flags Over Texas. I visited for the first time in November. Yes, this is a year-round park, but I technically had my first experience in the off-season, when the Sky Coaster, Judge Roy Scream, and La Vibora were closed. I found out the day before that Batman, Runaway Mountain, and Shockwave were also all scheduled to be closed, but they somehow all opened later in the day, so that was fortunate. Not to mention, many lines were incredibly long. Batman, New Texas Giant, and Runaway Mountain, I waited for all of those almost if not over an hour. Mr. Freeze and Pirates of Spelunker Cave also had decently long waits. I didn't even get to ride Joker because the line was too long. There were no shows that caught my eye, and overall it felt like a big part of the day was go to one attraction, oh no we're down, go to another one, oh now we're down, but the previous one is back up, almost like it was a wild goose chase around the park. That being said, a local friend praises this park and claims that I would have had a much better time if I went in peak summer season, so I'm more than willing and eager to give it another chance. At number 3 is Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I've heard rave reviews about this park, and I must say, it lives up to the hype. I went during holiday in the park, and all coasters were open, even Wonder Woman, which wasn't scheduled to open that day, and then suffered many technical difficulties, but I still got on. The only coaster I missed was the AC, or Red Side of Kid Flash, and that was just because of timing, lines, and priorities. This was a wonderful park, and I would love to get back here, especially since I was wowed by Iron Rattler, and then was told it wasn't even running at full potential because of the colder weather. I've also heard that their Fright Fest is one of, if not the best, so I'd really like to experience that. Second place is Silver Dollar City. This was high on my bucket list for parks last year, and it sure did not disappoint. I loved all the rides, holiday decorations, and shows. Now that I made my first official round around the park, checking off everything once before doing re-rides, I'd like to spend a summer day here re-experiencing the park, rides, experiences, just taking it in. I'd also like to do a lantern tour in Marvel Cave instead of just the regular one. Not to mention Fire in the Hole the sequel is opening next year. And number 1 is Kennywood. I had 2 hours here, the last operating hour on one day and the first operating hour on the next. I got one ride on Skyrocket, Phantom's Revenge, Thunderbolt, Old Mill, Steel Curtain, and one side of the Racer Loop. Not only do I want more rides on all of these, but there's plenty of coasters I mixed out on, including Exterminator and Jackrabbit, which I've heard nothing but good things about. I've also heard great things about their flats and other attractions, so much that, yes, I technically visited Kennywood, but I don't feel like I even got a fraction of the experience. It is my top priority for next year to spend a full day here. Moving on to my top 10 coasters I wanted to revisit from last year. I was also lucky enough to have been able to revisit all 10 of these. Number 10 was the Beast. I remember not being too impressed by this ride, especially with the roughness still after the retrack, but after giving it 2 more chances, I definitely enjoy it more. Row 2 was a win, especially at night. Beast night rides are some of, if not the best. Ninth was Montu. I had one ride last year and one this year. I still enjoyed it, and would definitely say it's one of the least rattly and most forceful inverts, especially with that Batwing and the deep trenches. In 8th, I had Icebreaker. I rode this 3 times this year after last year's one. I enjoyed the ejector and surprising forces that this family coaster delivered. And this year, with the removal of the comfort collar, those forces were only that much more pronounced. Wonderful rides. 7th place was Maverick. Get ready for one of 3 oddballs given my employment by, and therefore constant visitation to, Cedar Point. Maverick may be more so the others because I worked at a decent amount as well. I was impressed with my one ride last year. I don't know how many times I've ridden it now, but it truly never gets old. The ejector on the first drop and the first airtime hill still get me every time, and that second launch still really packs a punch. My 6th on the list was Millennium Force. I haven't ridden this as much as Maverick, but I've gotten a good number of rides here as well. Last year I'd said I was pleasantly surprised given my expectation from the nickname Millennium Forceless. This year brought me down from that novelty, but I'm still not complaining. Millennium Force is what I like to think of as a reliable classic thrill. Sure, it's not full of ejector airtime or whippy transitions, but it's smooth, it's still fast, and it's full of floater airtime and graceful. Is it my top pick? No, but that doesn't mean that it can't still be one of the best the park has to offer. 5th was Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom. I was blown away when I rode this last year by all the ejector. To be honest, I still enjoyed the ride, but was humbled a little bit this year. It was still great, but not as amazing and ejector-filled as I remember. In 4th place, I had the Legend. Same as Lightning Run, I was blown away last year by Legend, not for airtime this time, but for the smoothness. This year also humbled me a little bit. I think I rode last year right after a major retracking, so after a year you'd expect it to settle into that new wood a little bit. Again, my ride wasn't bad, it just wasn't as smooth as I remember from last year. In 3rd place, we travel less than 1,000 feet for a full 180 review. I was slightly underwhelmed by the voyage last year just because of the woody rattle that it had been hyped up to not have and ended up having. Going into it this year with that past experience and expectation, and I believe Holiday World does at least a partial retracking on Voyage every off-season, I enjoyed a ride that was still not butter smooth, but much more enjoyable than last year's. My second bucket list coaster to re-ride was Iron Gwazi. Last year I said it was relentless but way too short. While I still think it's a short ride, my 2 rides this year gave me a higher appreciation for this coaster. I also remember last year the seatbelt pinched my leg under the restraint for the whole ride, and I didn't get any of that this year, which is not the ride's fault, but obviously much more pleasant. I think my only complaint about Iron Gwazi this year was the dispatch times. With a line reaching an hour and the attendants slowly walking down the train to check seatbelts, heading back up, and then slowly walking the train again to check the lap bars, with the previous train having parked in the waiting break ages ago, there was no reason for 5-minute dispatches. Absolutely wild. But a fantastic ride. And the coaster I most wanted to re-ride this year was Steel Vengeance. Again, having worked at Cedar Point, I got a lot of opportunities to ride this absolute monster. I still enjoy it a whole ton, and it still packs a punch. I took my father on, and he said that might just be the best roller coaster I've ever been on. So it's not just Thuzies who praise it. It's a good ride. I also, however, did come to the realization that in order to be the coaster with the most airtime, you have to have a lot of airtime hills and therefore similar elements. So the airtime is relentless, but it does feel a bit repetitive, especially given how long it is, so that fourth lap kinda works both for and against it. I think my only real complaint about the ride experience is, in the series of bunny hills at the end, the one right before the brake run is just such a small hill that there's no airtime. And when compared to the quality you get for the rest of the ride, it just feels like a small last-minute letdown to an otherwise breathtaking ride. For rides I want to revisit most next year, I was fortunate to have been able to ride most of my favorite new ones multiple times. So in no specific order, here are the 4 coasters that I'm most eager to re-ride. Shivering Timbers. I was not impressed by this ride at all. It was rough, it gave me a headache. I liked Wolverine Wildcat better. Maybe I rode in a bad row or on a bad train. But I have a friend who's ridden El Toro, Voyage, Mystic Timbers, and still hails Shivering Timbers as the best wooden coaster. I want to enjoy it more than I did. I would also like to ride New Texas Giant again. Because of the lines at the park all day and the downtime the original RMC experienced after I already waited an hour, I only got on once, after waiting another hour later in the day. It was better than expected, but still doesn't measure up to the likes of Vengeance or Gwazi, as expected, given that it was a prototype. But more on that later. I had fun, and I'd like to ride again. It's also high on my priority list to ride Phantom's Revenge again. It was running one train, had a line, and I had limited time to try and experience as much of the park as possible. One ride wasn't enough, but this year it was all I could get. And Boardwalk Bullet is going to be the last one. Being on the boardwalk, you either had to buy an all-day pass or a single ride pass, and I opted for the latter. I enjoyed this Woody more than anticipated, and have heard others call it one of the best Woodies they've ever ridden. I want to give it more rides to better form my opinion. That is going to do it for part 1 of my 2023 amusement parks in review. Stay tuned in the next couple of weeks for parts 2 and 3 with my winners and losers and top 10 parks and my top 50 coasters. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.